turn to Isaiah chapter 60. I have several Bible verses that I want to read this morning. Isaiah chapter 60. Isaiah chapter 60. I want to give to you the premise or why we're going into this verse, and I'm using this as a jump off. I'm not going to circumvent the verse, but we're not going to study this verse. I'm going to study on the subject, the biblical roots of the Declaration of Independence. And let me tell you why. A couple weeks ago, I was talking to someone, and they said to me, and forgive me, I may not know the whole conversation, but this is what I got from it. They are not sure that the Minutemen of America were anything more than terrorists. And that we as a nation should not be, and this is where they didn't say it specifically, but it is implied, that we as a nation of the United States of America have no biblical right to be an independent nation. And I'll be honest, it ruffled my feathers. 20 years, or nearly 20 years in the Navy, serving my country. I love this country. But I'll tell you what, it caused me to do a research. And I have to be honest, these are not my notes. I'm not taking any credit for doing all the research. Somebody's already invented the wheel. I'm just going to ride the car. And so I'm not going to try. David Bernard is best known. He has a group called the Wall Builders. And he's best known for historical document search. And they have, I believe now, in their collection over 100,000 original documents dating back from the Revolutionary War and previous to that, and then coming forward in American history. He put out a video some years ago called America's Godly Heritage. Anybody ever see that one? It was actually on VHF. That's how long ago it was. Well, I contacted them Thursday or Friday. Anyways, this last week. And I told them I remembered that video. And they said, yeah, we have that. And I told them what I was looking for. And they said, yeah, we have that too. And they said, but what about... And so I bought a whole 3 different series, DVD sets. And they're broken down into 28 to 34, 35 minutes each. And so I've got a whole host. I've got more information than I can take time to do. I would like, once I get that this week, sometime in the future, we may do it on a Sunday afternoon. I will take excerpts or different parts of them. I won't show all. There's 10, 16, what was the other one? 4 more. So about 20 different videos. So it would take us almost a half a year if I did one a week, and I don't think that would be the case. But I want to take, because we're coming up onto a time in our elections that if we are not careful, we are going to allow this country to be taken over by people who do not want this country to exist. It's just that simple. Do I agree with the Republican Party? No. Do I agree with the Democratic Party? Let me just add a little bit to that. Absolutely no. But both parties have almost... somebody once told me some years ago, once you reach up to the level of Congress, Senate, and President, that level, there is very little difference between a Republican and a Democrat. I bet Bill would say that, but he didn't. But it was told to me many, many years ago. And I think it's true because everybody is interested in but one thing when you get to Congress and Senate: re-election. And it is time that we as America understood the biblical ideology why we are Americans. Now, I've got more information than I can actually give today. But I wanted to start out with Isaiah chapter 60 and look at verse number 12. Because some might ask, why, you're going to have to do some justification here because, Isaiah is for the nation of Israel. Isn't that right? Yeah, it is. But I want you to notice in Isaiah 60 and verse number 12, it says, "For the nation and kingdom that will not serve thee shall perish." He's talking, Isaiah is, the message is to Israel. And he says, "For the nation and kingdom that will not serve thee shall perish." But I think there's a little bit more if we read the rest of it. "Yea, those nations shall be utterly wasted." It is not just for the nation of Israel. We find in this context that God is giving a mandate, whether we are the nation of Israel or we are a nation outside of Israel. In fact, God actually told other nations, "Those that bless thee will be blessed, and those that curse thee will be cursed." That was to Abraham. So we have responsibility as a Gentile nation. And to be really honest, I'm not so sure, and I am not Church of God of, what was that? Herbert W. Armstrong. Herbert W. Armstrong actually believes that America is the 10 missing tribes of Israel. And I don't believe that for a minute. However, there are many within our ranks of America that are in fact Jewish by birth and nationality, and so they're intermingled with us, and I don't know the DNA, and I don't want to try. Be honest, I have refused to take a DNA test because those that Ancestry.com and the other places, you can do whatever you want, but I won't do it because they have a mandate that once you give your DNA choice, they turn that information over to the government. Now you think about that. Do you want your government to know who you are, what your bloodline is, and where your nationality is? Because there's people that have they have a reason why they want to know that. And I've given blood and everything, but if they've taken my DNA, they've done it without my permission, and so I do not want to be part of this. I'm very leery when the nation what do they call it? Contact tracing that's going on now. They're actually asking for volunteers to say, if you know someone that has had the coronavirus, then they want to know who you shook hands with. They want their phone numbers, they want their addresses, they want their names. And then they're going to come to you and say, who did you touch and shake hands with? They want their addresses, they want their phone numbers, they want their names. Do you understand what's going on here? We have a problem. All right, now let me quit ranting and raving. Get back to our verse. "The nation and kingdom that will not serve thee shall perish. Yea, those nations shall be utterly wasted." I want to give you 3 other verses, if I may. Psalm 33:12 says this. I pre-printed them out for time's sake. Psalm 33:12. "Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord, and the people whom hath chosen for his own inheritance." And I realize this is the nation of Israel. But we can make application to any nation who chooses to put God preeminent in their political views and standings. Proverbs 14:34. Proverbs 14:34. "Righteousness exalteth a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people." Again, he's talking, we know Solomon was, because we're studying Proverbs on Wednesday, Solomon's talking to his son. He's talking about the nation of Israel, but he says that emphatically, any nation, literally, righteousness exalteth a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. And he's talking about multiple nationalities. Genesis 35:11 says this, "And God said unto him, I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and multiply. A nation And a company, here, listen to this, and a company of nations shall be of thee, and kings shall come out of thy loins. Now, that's Abraham. How does that relate to us in America concerning, well, because nations shall come out of Abraham. Are we not, as a child of God, are we not grafted into the nation of Israel? So if we have a Christian nation, as we believe we ought to have, that we need to understand that that's part of the promise. He told Abraham, many nations, literally, I'll just expound it, around the world are going to be because of you. And I think Abraham is part of who we are. All that being said, I have a lot of things I want to speak about today. I found this poem yesterday, and I want to read it, because the question has to be asked, why do we stand for America? Why do we defend America? And this poem was written, it says by Lady Wolf. I don't know who that is, pen name or what, but I found this and I was brought to tears, and I wanted to share with you. It is entitled, Why We Fight. The protesters asked me when I put my bags on the plane, why do you fight? All soldiers are the same. There is no reason to go to war. We think it is unfair. There is no reason to go and die. No reason for us to pretend to care. Their words strike me to the bone as I turn and look them in the eyes. I would love to be at home, but I fight so you can believe in your lies. They stared at me shocked. Their flags dropped low, and as I told them a story, one that every few people know. I fight so they can say those things, their words that hurt me so, because if I don't play my part, who else will have to go? I don't do it for the glory, because there is none to be found. I don't do it for the money. I do it for my friend on the ground. A bullet has punctured his shoulder. He holds out his trembling hand. He asks me to write home and slips me his wedding band. We fight so that you don't have to, as you all go about your way. We fight so you can go to work and sit in an office all day. We fight for all the mothers whose children lie in the earth. We fight for all the children whose fathers missed their birth. War is never pretty, and it is seldom ever kind, but I'll grab my gun and fight to protect any friend of mine. So before you say that you don't care, or that all soldiers are the same, think about what you do before you place that blame. You think that you shouldn't be here, or that we shouldn't be here, but nothing will ever change. Look into a soldier's eyes as they point their weapon downrange. We do it to protect you, because there are things that you don't know. There is more than things that bump in the night, and that is the reason why I have to go. That gives to us a little perspective of our sailors, soldiers, and airmen. It isn't a money. It is a pride of who we are. There is a reason why this. I was reading an article of the myth of the biblical endorsement, or no, that's not what it was entitled. The myth of the biblical connection to the independence, the Declaration of Independence. And they went on to say that the reason why that this is so vague of anything they've mentioned of God, of the Declaration of Independence, is because the founding fathers were not really Christians. They did not have any biblical background, and they wanted a secular nation, not a Bible nation. And that is not true. And if I ever get back and we can do some of this series, the reason why that so little is said, or in a general purpose, is that the amount of denominations each colony of the 13 colonies literally were formed so that they could practice the freedom of religion as they saw fit. There was a Baptist one, there was a Quaker, there was a Catholic, there is a Presbyterian, there is Episcopalian. Each colony had its own. In fact, if you were to study history, you'll find that if a Baptist went into the Presbyterian, they could find themselves in jail. If the Presbyterian went into the Episcopalian or Episcopalian went into the Baptist, they would find themselves in jail, fined for practicing heresy. That was the freedom that we sought as a nation, that we as a people could have a nation that would be free of the government interference from the tyranny that was taking place. I have printed out the Declaration of Independence. The further went on to say in that article that once the Declaration of Independence was written and sent to King George, that it has no biblical or has no fundamental function within the government. And I've got to tell you, if you study our Constitution, they referred heavily upon from the Mayflower Compact to the constitutions that were in each state and the Declaration of Independence, and together they formed a constitution for all people. That's why the First Amendment is one that was written not for separation from the state that we should have, that we are a quote-unquote a secular nation. It was designed that we would not infringe upon the right of an individual or the right of a state. If they would like to endorse a formal religion, that's their business, not the federal government. If you will go back in some of the original, and I'm sure David Bernard for some of this because I remember watching it, but there are some of like Massachusetts and Rhode Island and such, they actually have in their constitution that a person cannot run for a public office. They couldn't be a dog catcher unless they profess Christ as king, as savior, sovereign. It was very specific. Public service was intended for the Christian. Now we are told that there is no room in our nation for Christians in public service. We are completely upside down. I would like to read to you part of the Declaration of Independence. I get them in half pages so I can read them easier for me. It's only 7 pages long. There are 20, I put numbers on them so I would know. There are 29 accusations. One of them, interesting enough, of the 29 accusations in the Declaration of Independence, one of them we know very well. Taxation without representation. Isn't that interesting? If you think about Michigan these days, that we are being taxed and yet told what we can and cannot do without any representation. Our Michigan Congress and our Michigan Senate has been set aside, and one queen thinks she's in charge. We have a problem. So I brought up the Declaration of Independence. Interesting. You would almost think it's a call to arms. If you're not careful, you might think that this call to arms is something that we need to consider today. Let me read some of this. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth to separate an equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We can't talk about that just yet, maybe later. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among them, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. And accordingly, all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object events a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, all right, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, meaning usurp authority, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To provide these, let facts be submitted to a candid world. And there are 29 of them, and I won't read that. Let me get down to the final paragraph. Yes. We therefore, there are 29 accusations in the Declaration of Independence. And if you want to, you can look that up on the internet and you can read them. We therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress assembled appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. I don't know about anyone else. That means something. They made a pledge, their life, their fortune, and their sacred honor. I'd like to give you a little bit of a background of some of them, of what took place. There were 56 people that signed the Declarations of Independence. And I looked it up, and you can find different things about the signers. And some of them you have to look up and kind of decide whether or not this is a tall tale or not. Of the 56 signers, I asked the question, and I got several different answers when I binged it, Google, whatever you want, did a web search. What is the biblical background of the signers of the Declaration of Independence? Because I was told there was only one clergy or preacher that signed the Declaration of Independence. Another one said that there were at least 4. Many of them were children of ministers. And so I decided to look at some of the particular names of the people that signed the Declaration of Independence. But I give to you this paragraph as I was, by the way, I have the names of every one of them. There is one Catholic that was represented Maryland. Connecticut, they were all Congregationalists. Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Georgia, Massachusetts, they were all Congregationalists. Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, Virginia, Delaware, Maryland, again, there's some more of Maryland, Massachusetts, New Jersey, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, they're all Episcopalian. Virginia, Pennsylvania, Georgia, another one, Pennsylvania. Here's one, North Carolina and Pennsylvania, they were Quaker Episcopalian. They were very fundamentalist. New Hampshire, Delaware, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New York, and some more from Pennsylvania, Presbyterian. It was a vast majority of the representation. Every one of them had a Bible background. But what I thought was rather interesting as I was studying it, and I'd like to read a paragraph to this, is to give you an understanding of, because you have to understand, back in the 1700s, there were very few people that were educated. Those that were educated had to go to college, and if they went to a college in America, they usually went to places like Princeton, Harvard, Yale, what's that, Mary and something and Mary, or Mary and something, and I should have written it down and I didn't. But anyways, every one of those colleges were founded, because they're talking Ivy League here. I mean, if you go to these schools today, they are anti-God. They don't even want to have anything to do with God. Yet Princeton, Harvard, and Yale specifically were places formed that they might train young men to become ministers, preachers, missionaries. They did other things, education and law. But the main purpose of these schools are actually, and I was watching one from David Bernard some years ago. He went, and I think it was to Princeton, and behind a tree in the opening court, where the original opening court where you walked onto campus, there's a great big tree, a bush. You pull back the bush, and there is a placard on there, and in that placard, the declaration that they are called by God and instituted for the power and glory of God to train men for the ministry. They didn't take that plaque down yet. I wonder why. They call it heritage. Let me read you this paragraph. Half of the Declaration signers had some sort of divinity school training. And while John Adams was the most overly pious, even the supposed non-believers among the founders, such as Benjamin Franklin. By the way, that's not even quite the right statement. Benjamin Franklin, at one time in his life, declared his allegiance to the Bible and to the church, and that Jesus Christ was Lord. Whether or not he was a Christian, I don't know. But many people make him out to be what is called a deist. A deist is someone who believes there is a God that probably created us, but now is stepped away, and God is overwatching us, but has no power over us. That's a deist. And many people believe that's what Ben Franklin was. But he did say some peculiar things, and I'll get to this. Listen to this. And so those founders, such as Ben Franklin, found the need to turn to God in times of trouble. During the Constitutional Convention, most contentious moments, when the most contentious moments, it was Ben Franklin, who not only offered a prayer, who also added this, and it was in the record. Our prayers, sir, talking to God, were heard, to the Congress, were heard, and they were graciously answered. All of us who were engaged in the struggle must have observed frequent instances of a superintending providence in our favor. To that kind providence, we owe this happy opportunity of consulting in peace on the means of establishing our future national felicity. And have we now forgotten that powerful friend? He's talking about Jesus. Or do we imagine that no longer need his assistance? Wow. So Ben Franklin is an atheist, you say? I don't think so. I don't know his stand, and one day when we get to heaven, we'll discover who's there and who's not. But he recognized when America was being formed that if it was not for the providential hand of God, we wouldn't be the United States of America. Just that simple. I was watching an excerpt, and we may get it in the video. I know we'll get it in the videos, but you may catch it, and I'll mention it to you. That when they were coming to the point, and I believe it was during the Declaration of Independence. It may be off. Maybe it was when they were doing our Constitution. But anyways, they asked a local preacher to come in and to pray over them so that they could have God's blessings, instructions, and direction from God Almighty. When it was done, it was said in the video, they had quotes from different people. Even the Quakers were in tears. Quakers were not known for emotionalism. Even the Quakers were in tears, begging for God's mercy. Oh, was it a mamby-pamby little prayer? Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for this gathering together. Bless us now. Instruct us as we go. Well, if you want to count that into a 3.5-hour prayer. 3.5 hours before they would put any ink to paper. Something needs to be said. John Witherspoon was one of those clergymen. He was a pastor. And it is said here in this study about the over 50%, it said this: most of the founding fathers were not pastors, but were church officers, elders, managers, or founders of Bible societies. Showing the clergy label upon them is correct. Over 50%, like 57% of the names. I thought I would give you a few of the names. You say, boy, preacher, when are you going to get into the Bible? I didn't know that I have Bible because I have a study on the biblical roots of the Declaration of Independence. And should I be given another opportunity, we'll get there. But I wanted to give you, I want you to understand the importance of having God into our nation, because we so often take it so lightly. And yet if God had not prevailed in us as a people, if God had not providentially gathered us as a nation, then by all means we shouldn't survive. And by the way, I was, and history would have it, our Constitution is what, 200 and, somebody do the math? It's 260, 200 some years old now. I forget what the math is anymore. Over 250 years old. Did you know we lived in Italy for 8 years? 4 years, and then came back and did another 4 years. In the time since World War II, Italy has rewritten its constitution some 13 times. How many times have America rewritten its constitution? Somebody? Zero. They have amended it. See, what the world wants to do now, and I'm talking Democrats and Republican alike, because there are some out there, George W. Bush was one of them, called our Constitution a living, breathing document, meaning we need to alter it for the needs of the people this day. God forbid. The original intent was that we would be a nation under God and would seek the providential hand of God and God's wisdom. And the day that we fail to do that is the nation that we fail to be a biblical nation. And I'm afraid we've already passed that. But it does not mean that we cannot have that back. If in 2 Chronicles 7:14, I know it's to the nation of Israel, but a great passage. If my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves and pray and seek the face and turn from their wicked ways. If we want that same principle, because I'm going to tell you, the Constitution, as I've been studying the Bible, the writers of the Constitution spent most of their time in the Old Testament as they formed this nation we call America. You say, well, I thought that the Old Testament is for the Jews. They didn't say that it wasn't for the Jews. They used the principle that God gave the Jewish nation and said, this is what I want you to do as a people. And they, I think, came to the conclusion, if it's good enough for God's people, it's good enough for us. And so they have biblical principle, Deuteronomy, Judges, Ezra, Nehemiah. I mean, just over and over, just Bible verses throughout the Old Testament. And there is, I've looked them up, I've read through the Bible a number of times. I find nowhere in the Bible the declaration that America will be a free, godly nation. How they did it is reading the Bible. They came to the conclusion there are principles in which we can glean from the teaching of these scriptures and use them to establish us as a godly nation. And so they did. I got 5 more minutes and I ain't got time. Samuel Adams, signer of the Declaration, father of the Revolution, Harvard, Orthodox. John Hancock. Oh, by the way, who was our first president of the United States of America? Anybody know? No, George Washington was not. What? George Washington was not. Let me read this. John Hancock, first signer of the Declaration, acting president of the United States, started the Minutemen, commissioned George Washington to become the chief, the commander-in-chief of the colonial army. Now, who was the first president? You didn't know that, did you? Everyone said, by election, George Washington was the first president. By delegation, when they literally took the representation that we call a republic, and they were in the Declaration, before the Declaration of Independence, they were already in a place where they formed a government before the Declaration, because if you're going to form a Declaration of Independence, you better have something to stand on. So they came together and says, this is what we want to do as a people. This is what we want to accomplish as a nation. We need a leader. So among them, they appointed one to become the president, John Hancock. No wonder he's the biggest. Oh, by the way, he was the first signer of the Declaration of Independence. Since he was the president, probably would be the appropriate. John Quincy Adams, sixth president of the United States, vice president of the American Bible Society, of the Massachusetts Bible Society, attended Harvard. Why? He's an Orthodox. Robert Treat Paine, signer of the Declaration, military chaplain, helped write the Massachusetts Constitution, attended Harvard, Orthodox. These are all Bible colleges, by the way. Rufus King, signer of the Constitution, select as manager of the American Bible Society. signer of the Constitution, ratifier of the Bill of Rights, attended Harvard, Orthodox. Bushrod Washington, U.S. Supreme Court Justice, Vice President of the American Bible Society, Vice President of the American Sunday School Union, attended William and Mary, that's the other college. William and Mary, Orthodox. He went to become a preacher. John Lowell, Revolutionary officer, member of the Colonial Congress, member of the Society for Propagating of the Gospel among the Indians and others, attended Harvard, Orthodox. Authored Article 1 of the Massachusetts Constitution of 1779 and his insistence upon the adoption of the Bill of Rights. All men are born free and equal and have certain natural, established, and inalienable rights, among which may be reckoned the right of enjoying and defending their lives and liberty. Interesting. Jonathan Trumbull, Governor of Connecticut, Harvard, Orthodox, ordained pastor. Timothy Pickering, Revolutionary General, Secretary of the State. His ideas formed the Northwest Ordinance, Harvard, Orthodox preacher. William Samuel Johnson, signer of the Constitution, attended Yale, Orthodox. James, I'll just go through a couple of them. James Bodine, Governor of Massachusetts, member of the Society for Propagating the Gospel among the Indians and others, attended Harvard, Orthodox. James Kent, father of the American jurisprudence, attended Yale and was Orthodox. Joel Barlow, diplomat under Washington and Adams, chaplain in the American Revolution for 3 years, attended Yale and was an Orthodox, not becoming a liberal until 1794. John Cotton Smith, Governor of Connecticut, U.S. Congressman, President of Litchfield County Foreign Missionary Society, first President of the Connecticut Bible Society, President of the American Bible Society, President of the American Board of Foreign Missions, attended Yale, Orthodox. Do you see what I'm getting to it? We have our heritage based on preachers who stood up and said there is a tyranny that is going on, that unless we stand up and make our voice known, King George is going to continue to be a ramrod and do his will. And by the way, if you'll read history, and I know I'm getting passionate and I don't have time to go through the rest, you'll find that when the British met at the church, and the first firing that was taking place at the church, and I don't remember the name of the church, they were there for one specific reason: to disarm the Americans. To disarm. You don't think it's important that we have the freedom to bear arms? A country that has no ability to defend itself against a tyrant of government has no ability to become their own government. And the British were scared to death that an America that has that many firearms and the ability to defend itself will be a country that will repel itself against the British people. Preacher, you're getting awful emotional. The more I study it, the deeper it gets. And I got to tell you, I love America. And I love the history that we have. And I pray that sometime in the near future, as I get the videos and I start to preview them and pick out some ones that will help us, that you'll understand how important it is that we vote correctly. And we can allow this tyranny to continue, or we can stand up and be an American people, by the people, for the people. Abraham said it right at Gettysburg. And we need to be an American people that stands for righteousness. I'm out of time. Father, thank you for the sweet time that you've given us. Lord, I fear I haven't done anything concerning this subject. But I pray that it would be usable for your honor and your glory. Lord, help us to understand that we as a nation need to call upon you. We need to be on our face for hours, just as they did in the Congress and the time of the Declaration of Independence, begging for your grace and your mercies upon we the people. And so, Lord, thank you for the sweet time that you've given us to remember history. And may you draw honor and glory from it. Amen.